In this episode, we're going to connect AI risk thinking to one of the most important practical skills in any organization, deciding which AI use cases are worth doing and which ones should be limited, redesigned, or rejected. Beginners often assume AI adoption is mostly about whether the technology works, but in reality, the bigger question is whether the use case fits the organization's strategy and whether the organization can manage the risk that comes with it. A use case can be technically impressive and still be a poor choice because it creates more harm potential than value. Another use case can be modest but powerful because it supports a core business goal and stays within safe boundaries. When you learn to align AI use cases to strategy, you stop thinking of AI as a collection of features and start thinking of it as a set of decisions about where automation and prediction belong. That alignment also makes risk management easier because it gives you a clear basis for boundaries, oversight levels, and acceptable trade-offs. By the end, you should be able to explain what it means to define value in a way that matters, what constraints really are, and how risk boundaries shape responsible AI use. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start with the idea of strategy, because strategy is simply the organization's chosen direction and priorities. Strategy answers questions like what the organization is trying to achieve, who it serves, what it wants to be known for, and how it plans to compete or succeed. When an AI use case supports strategy, it strengthens the organization's mission, improves customer outcomes, increases operational reliability, or creates defensible advantages. When it does not support strategy, it becomes a distraction, a cost, and a new risk surface. Beginners sometimes hear strategy and think of executive speeches, but at a practical level, strategy is a filter for decisions. If the organization's strategy emphasizes trust and reliability, then AI use cases that are hard to explain or that increase unpredictability need extra caution. If the strategy emphasizes safety, then use cases that influence safety outcomes should have the highest oversight and strongest evidence requirements. Aligning AI use cases to strategy means ensuring that what you automate is worth automating and that the organization is prepared to handle the consequences. Value is the next concept, and it needs to be defined clearly because vague value claims are a common source of AI misuse. Value can include saving time, reducing costs, improving accuracy, improving customer experience, reducing risk, or enabling new services. However, real value is not just a promise. It is a measurable improvement in outcomes that matter to the organization. A use case that claims it will save time should be evaluated in terms of total effort, including the time spent correcting errors, managing exceptions, and handling customer complaints. A use case that claims it will improve decisions should be evaluated in terms of decision quality, fairness, and the cost of being wrong. A use case that claims it will reduce risk should be evaluated in terms of whether it truly reduces harmful outcomes or simply shifts them into less visible places. Beginners benefit from a simple rule. Value must be linked to a business outcome, not to a technical feature. When value is defined as an outcome, it becomes easier to weigh against risk and constraints. Constraints are often misunderstood as negative obstacles, but in responsible AI work, constraints are what keep a use case realistic and safe. A constraint is any condition that limits how the use case can operate, such as privacy requirements, security requirements, legal restrictions, ethical boundaries, data availability, or resource limits. Constraints also include business constraints, like the need to preserve customer trust, the need to maintain transparency, or the need to avoid decisions that could harm vulnerable people. If a use case cannot operate within key constraints, it is not ready or not appropriate, no matter how attractive the promise. For beginners, it is helpful to see constraints as guardrails that protect the organization from taking shortcuts that create long-term harm. Constraints are also a tool for design, because if you define constraints early, you can shape the use case to fit them rather than discovering conflicts late. Many AI failures happen because teams build an ambitious system and then discover they cannot legally use the data they trained on, or they cannot explain outcomes in a way regulators require. Early constraint thinking prevents those expensive surprises. Now let's introduce the concept of risk boundaries, because boundaries are where strategy, value, and constraints become actionable. A risk boundary is a defined limit on what the organization will allow, based on how much harm could occur and how confident the organization is in its ability to manage that harm. Boundaries can be defined by impact, such as not allowing AI to make final decisions in high-stakes areas without human review. Boundaries can be defined by data, such as prohibiting the use of certain sensitive data types in certain AI systems. Boundaries can be defined by purpose, such as prohibiting the use of AI for surveillance or manipulation. Boundaries can also be defined by transparency requirements, like requiring that customers can get an explanation or a review when an automated decision affects them. When boundaries are clear, teams can innovate safely because they know where the edge is. When boundaries are unclear, teams guess, and guessing is risky. A practical way to think about aligning use cases is to treat each use case as a bargain the organization is making. The organization is bargaining that the value gained is worth the risk taken, and that the risk can be controlled within constraints. For low-impact use cases, the bargain is often favorable, such as using AI to draft internal notes that are reviewed by a human. The risk is limited because the output is not directly making a high-stakes decision, and errors can be caught before harm occurs. For high-impact use cases, the bargain becomes harder, like using AI to influence eligibility decisions, safety actions, or legal obligations. In those cases, the organization must demand stronger evidence, stronger oversight, and tighter boundaries, because the cost of failure is higher. This bargain framing helps beginners understand why not all AI uses should be treated the same. It also helps explain why governance programs classify use cases by impact and apply different levels of review. One common failure pattern is the shiny object use case, where a team proposes AI because it seems modern and exciting, not because it supports a clear strategic outcome. These use cases often have vague value claims, weak understanding of constraints, and unclear risk boundaries. They also tend to expand in scope over time, starting with a small pilot and then quietly becoming part of a decision process without proper review. Another failure pattern is the efficiency trap, where a team chooses AI to reduce workload but does not account for the hidden cost of errors, rework, and trust damage. For example, an AI tool might reduce the time to respond to customers, but if responses are wrong or insensitive, the organization may face more complaints and reputational harm. Aligning to strategy helps prevent these patterns because it forces teams to explain why the use case matters and what trade-offs are acceptable. Strategy alignment also helps leadership say no in a principled way, which reduces conflict and prevents inconsistent approvals. A beginner-friendly method for shaping risk boundaries is to think about how the AI output will be used, because usage defines risk. If the AI output is advisory, meaning it suggests options and a human decides, the boundary is different than if the AI output is determinative, meaning it directly triggers an action. If the AI output affects only internal workflow efficiency, the risk is different than if it affects customer rights, employee careers, or safety outcomes. If the AI is used with sensitive personal data, the boundaries must be tighter than if it uses non-sensitive operational data. If the AI is used in a regulated decision, boundaries must account for transparency and fairness obligations. This usage-based thinking helps you connect the technical system to business harm and legal exposure. It also sets you up for later episodes where we talk about policies, documentation expectations, and risk assessment methods. In exam scenarios, this is often the key to choosing the best answer because the best answer reflects the use context. Another important part of alignment is recognizing that constraints are not always negotiable, and this is where beginners need a mature mindset. Some constraints are hard, like legal prohibitions, contractual obligations, and privacy commitments to customers. Other constraints are strategic, like commitments to fairness or safety that define the organization's reputation and values. When teams treat hard constraints as obstacles to work around, risk becomes inevitable. Responsible alignment means designing use cases that fit constraints, not forcing constraints to fit the use case. It also means being honest about what the organization can manage. If the organization does not have monitoring, documentation, or oversight capacity, then high-impact AI use cases should be delayed or redesigned. A use case that is too risky for the organization's current maturity can be a good idea later, after capabilities improve. This idea is important because it frames governance as a journey rather than a simple yes or no decision. Alignment also involves thinking about where AI should not be used, which is often harder than identifying where it could be used. AI should be avoided or heavily constrained when the organization cannot tolerate errors, cannot provide explanations, cannot monitor outcomes, or cannot control misuse. AI should also be avoided when it would replace human judgment in decisions that require empathy, context, or ethical reasoning that the model cannot provide. This does not mean humans are perfect, but it means some decision contexts require human responsibility in a way automation cannot safely replicate. Organizations can still use AI to support humans in these contexts, like summarizing information for review, but the boundary is that a human must make the final decision and be accountable. For beginners, the key is not to memorize a list of forbidden uses, but to understand the logic of boundaries. High impact plus weak control equals unacceptable risk. That logic will help you reason through unfamiliar scenarios. Because the AAIR mindset is about defensible decisions, it is helpful to think about how you would explain an aligned use case to a skeptical executive. You would start by stating the strategic outcome the use case supports, such as improving customer support quality or reducing fraud losses. Then you would explain what the AI will and will not do, so the boundary is clear. Then you would state the constraints, like data limitations and privacy requirements, and confirm the design respects them. Finally, you would explain the oversight plan, such as how performance will be monitored and what triggers escalation. This kind of explanation shows that the use case is not just a technology experiment. It is a controlled decision with accountability and evidence. It also prepares the organization to defend the choice later if problems occur. Exam questions often reward this style of thinking because it reflects responsible governance, not technical enthusiasm. To close, aligning AI use cases to strategy is the discipline of choosing the right problems, defining real value, respecting constraints, and setting risk boundaries that keep outcomes defensible. Strategy tells you which outcomes matter and what the organization stands for, which shapes what kinds of trade-offs are acceptable. Value must be defined as measurable outcome improvement, not as excitement about features. Constraints are the guardrails that prevent legal, ethical, and operational failures, and they should be identified early so use cases are designed to fit them. Risk boundaries turn all of this into actionable rules about where AI can be used, how it can be used, and what level of oversight is required. When organizations do this well, they can adopt AI in a way that supports their mission and protects people, trust, and compliance. This is a core Domain 1 skill because governance without strategic alignment becomes bureaucracy, and AI adoption without alignment becomes uncontrolled risk. With alignment, AI becomes a disciplined tool rather than a runaway experiment.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.